Morning members, and welcome to the July meeting of the Exmoor National Park Authority. Keen to get going, we've got lots to get through today. And our first task is to elect a chair, so please could I have nominations for the chair of the authority? Stephen.
Could I propose Miss Davis?
Thank you. Do you have any other nominations? Seconded, sorry. Any other nominations? Mike?
I was second and sorry, wrong vote.
That's all right.
I would second the proposition.
It's been seconded, but I think I have a second proposition.
Oh, no.
No, thank you. There being no other nominations, Andrea is elected chair. Thank you, Andrea.
Should we ask Angela if she wants to speak?
Oh,
That's a very good point. No. New matters. Can I thank you for your trust and faith in me? It's a great honour to be chairman again. Thank you. The next item is election of deputy chairman. Can I have nominations, please, for deputy chairman?
Robin?
Thank you, Jeremy. A seconder for Robin? Thank you, Andrew. Any other nominations? All those in favour? Thank you. Well, that's very good. Thank you. You happy to accept? As you just didn't do that one. Yes, please do. Especially as I haven't got my glasses out of my bag yet. Apologies for absence. I don't think we've got any, have we? Declarations of interest. Right, let's start this one. Jeremy?
No. I've got just the confidential one.
Thank you.
My neighbour.
Mike? Mandy? No. Nick?
No.
Chris? No interest, Carl. Must be at the first. Chairman's announcements. I have a couple of announcements. First of all, I just want to formally note the sad news that Beck Wild, our information advisor at Lynmouth, she passed away on the 22nd of May. Beck had worked for the authority since 2018. Her love of nature and the area will be sadly missed by her colleagues. Beck's funeral took place on Wednesday the 19th of June in Linton, and many of us in the room were there. And national park centres were closed as a mark of respect to enable colleagues to attend. Our thoughts are with her husband Dave and the family at this difficult time. I saw Dave on Friday, and he just thanked everybody for all the kind wishes that they'd sent. He's doing well. I mean, as well as you can at this, but yeah, he said thank you very much. I'd like to welcome will be when we vote on it, hopefully. I can't predict what will happen, but hopefully, our independent persons, Dana Mortimer and Adam Stainer, who have joined us this morning and whose appointment we'll be invited to confirm later in the meeting. I'm sure it'll be fine. Welcome. Hope you enjoy it. And we've also very privileged to have behind them two work experience students who are... Oh, just one. Sorry, Ellie. Ellie's always learning. Every day's a school day. So, welcome. I hope you enjoy it and hope it's not too confusing, but Ellie will tell you what's going on. Minutes of the last meeting, so we need to approve the correct record the minutes of the meetings of the authority held on the 7th of May. Can I have somebody to move that, please? Thank you, Mike. And second, Jeremy. All those in favour? Thank you very much. And we will go through the minutes as we normally do. So, page 1, page 2. No hands, no questions. Excellent. Right. Item 7, public speaking. We have nobody coming to speak. No. Thank you. And item 8, corporate plan. Claire.
Thank you. Morning members. So we have before you our
annual report of progress against the corporate plan for last year, 2023 to 24. I'm not going to go through it. There's a lot of information in there, but I did just want to say a couple of things by way of introduction. Firstly, as the covering report highlights, you'll see that there's been an awful lot happening over the last year or two in terms of changes to legislation and sort of the national priorities for protected landscapes. This obviously has important implications for us as an authority and the work that we're carrying out. So particularly draw your attention to the new legally binding targets around the Environment Act and the Environment Improvement Plan. We have 10 of those targets specifically identified where government is looking to protect landscapes, including national parks, to really play a key role in helping to deliver them. Out of those 10, 5 are around sort of nature recovery, farming and land management, 3 are around climate change, and 2 are around heritage and access. They don't sort of cover the full suite of what we do, but I think it does give us a clear steer of the sort of the priorities for us as a national park, and that is obviously very important as we're developing our current partnership plan. In terms of helping to deliver that, there are 2 other sort of new or updated legal duties. One is for all relevant authorities to a sort of strengthened biodiversity duty. So for us as an authority and also our partners, there is a duty for us to consider and take action for biodiversity. And then there's the duty for other sort of authorities and partners to help deliver national park purposes. So that has been strengthened from a duty to have regard to national park purposes to a duty to further them. So in all of that, I think it really gives us a sort of a good platform on which we can progress in terms of our delivery of our work. The other thing that I wanted to just highlight again in the covering report was that, having gone through a business review last year, the consequence of the budgetary situation and the budget cuts that we've had to make, and the organisational review that we've undertaken, obviously that's was a really significant piece of work. It is quite unsettling for staff, but I think you will see from the report that still we have had a really good year, and the majority of the actions that we've had in our corporate plan have been delivered. We always say that our staff are our greatest asset, and I think that definitely is the case and is shown through this report. So that's all I wanted to say by way of instruction, and very happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Amber.
And brief, absolutely, it shows an amazing amount of work that the team has continued to deliver, as you say. It was only a comment, and it's an obvious comment. Number 27 on page 5 about visitor management and visitors enjoying Exmoor responsibly and safely. Obviously, reduced range capacity, and organisers still doing a really good job, but in terms of our primary purposes, that is upsetting, concerning, not what we want to do. I know, and I still know that the team do a fantastic job, but it's just to really flag that something that it is very much what we're here to do, and I suppose other ways that we can ensure that we continue to interact with visitors in whatever way, and through partnership work and projects is really important. But yeah, I know they do a great job, but it is a concern, given the primacy of that as what we're here to do. Thank you.
I have no other hands raised, so we have been... sorry.
So on page 3, on the 15th, I'm going to make mention now, because I'm speaking later.
Can you put the microphone on? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to raise the note, but I can't speak later. And this is a general point about woodlands on Exmoor. How do we assess the impact on landscape, and what is our what is our aim on the landscape and trees within Exmoor? This, it's not an argument made up, just a question of how we look at it, because I mean landscape has always been, or the look of Exmoor, it's always been an important thing, and we've had in the past it was, trees were definitely a no-no, but obviously things have changed. I just wonder if there's any judgment made about how the landscape should look with concerning trees.
So obviously we have our landscape character assessment, which sort of describes the landscape and the landscape character, and woods are very much part of that landscape character. And interestingly, in the public opinion survey that we did for the partnership plan, sort of wooded valleys was the top special qualities that the public identified. So it is an important part of what makes Exmoor special. In terms of new woodland and extending woodland cover, I think is the point you're making. Yes, absolutely. The work of the woodlands team has actually been developing ways in which we can consider the impact of more. So it's not just woodlands; it's trees and tree cover generally. So it might be individual trees or scattered trees in the landscape as well as blocks of woodland. So there is a lot of work that's gone into looking at how that can be done in a way that helps to enhance the landscape character rather than detract from it. So when you talk about individual schemes, they would have a specific landscape character assessment. They would have to have, if they're large woodland planting blocks, they would have to have an environmental impact assessment. So all of those processes are in train. But I think as an overall kind of strategic approach to it, there has been a lot of work done to look very carefully at the opportunities and where there might be areas that I don't think there's anywhere that you would sort of rule in or out. It's just more a case of there might be some areas that are much more sensitive to more trees or more woodland than others, and that can help guide decisions. Obviously, we have a landscape officer who's very closely involved in any of the work that we do around woodlands and woodland creation. Thank you.
Robin.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, first of all, I'd like to move for recommendation. And just secondly, around comment as well. There's a huge amount of green text in our corporate plan, which I think is a phenomenal achievement. Just bear in mind, we have a very small complement of staff, as is shown later on, and a reducing number as well, unfortunately. And I'd just like to remind members that those staff are under an awful lot of pressure. They're very dedicated, they put a lot of time to this, and there are occasions when they get challenged a little. Please expect all members respect the fact our staff are working under pressure and treat them accordingly. And any concerns, please address to the Chief Executive directly, and only the Chief Executive, please. On that basis, I'd like to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Do we have a seconder? Mike, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Right, item 9 is the external audit plan for next year, or this year, actually, 31st of March. Because it's a plan, I'm not going to ask Ken to go through it because it's a plan, which is in there and quite clear. Are there any questions about the plan? I think we'll go straight to, please. No? So, because we're asked to receive the plan, which is an audit plan, which is fairly sort of straightforward. That's why so can I have somebody to move, please? Thank you. Jeremy, happy to second? All those in favour? Excellent. Item 10. So then we will go over to you, This is more than a plan.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Our external audit partner was due to meet us for that last item, but she hadn't joined the Teams session by that time, so I think the activity was actually quite beneficial. So I'm just going to leave that screen there. So, good morning. After the corporate plan item, which is, as Mr Milton actually explained, is a really positive, really kind of exciting amount of work and achievements across the national park. We continue, in a sense, reviewing 23-24. So this report is in two parts. It covers the financial performance and budget of the authority for 23-24 and the budget performance to date for 24-25. So it's split between what was essentially the management accounts in item 10.1 and our financial accounting, our statement of accounts in item 10.2. So the report 10.1 shows the actual spending income for 23-24 compared with the revised budgets, shows our position on reserves, our fixed term programmes, capital spend, our prudential indicators and our activity against that, as well as plans for additional one-off monies that DEFRA have announced early in 24-25. It also reports on the outturn for 23-24, the adequacy of our general fund balance at 31st of March 24, our transfers to and from reserves, and the budget monitoring and medium-term financial plan update for the year we're currently in, 24-25. So in terms of our management accounts, the report shows that we had an overspend of about 93,000 in last year, and this was transferred from general fund balance. The overspend was mainly due to the higher than expected pay award, a significant amount of woodlands work where the future cash inflows will be received but have not been claimed by the time we put the accounts together. There have been ongoing legal fees for our long-running planning disputes, and also our Pinkery Outdoor Education Centre suffers from a slight under-recovery of income. And these overspends are partially met by increased income from our field services team, who instituted an internal income generation element. They were creating work across the estate. We also had increased National Park Centre income, as the earlier corporate plan report showed, a significant amount of one-off grants and other sources, and we also had some underspend across several service areas. So alongside our National Park grant, which is our core grant, which is about 3.2 million, and has been for the last 5 years, the authority also received just over 3 million in external income. And this covered various services and projects. So that included trading income, external grants and contribution, fees and charges, rent and interest. And some of our major sources of income you're probably aware with the Farming Protected Landscape Scheme, FIPL, programme. We had the English Coast Path creation, which is coming to an exciting conclusion in a couple of weeks' time. We had the HLF Pioneers project, another exciting project kicking off. We received income from biodiversity net gain grants, which we'll hear about a bit later, and also £100,000 from National Park Fund for Active Transport. So alongside this, we've initiated and delivered a range of fixed-term programmes and capital projects in the year. So our fixed-term programmes, what we call our top slice elements, include support for a historic buildings officer post, support towards the Pinkery overspend, and tourism activities amongst several other schemes. In terms of capital projects, as well as tree planting at Kingswood, the new woodland at Simmons Bath, and Bywood, we had the Great Bradley Bridge project kind of really start to kick off, and that will see much more of that in the coming weeks. We had the conclusion of significant decarbonisation works at Pinkery. And we also had the purchase of new vehicles and equipment, and that's detailed on page 6 of the report. Many of these supported our progress in reducing our carbon footprint. We've made significant gains of that in this past 12 months. Our reserves increased by about 312,000. The increase in reserves is due to contributions from various elements. So we had some significant amount of Section 106 payments. Planning Skills Delivery Fund to help us support our planning backlog. Excuse me, sorry. From our authority estate, we had increased Caremore donations, particularly around the Great Bradley Bridge scheme. And we also had our Exmoor Pioneer sponsorship from HLF. The majority of our reserves, so around about 3 million out of about £3.5 million worth of reserves, are held for a specific purpose, subject to the outcome of a legal dispute in one case, or committed to future projects. So they are earmarked reserves. Later in the report, I talk about the 24-25 budget. So that budget was built and presented to yourselves as members in March. And it contains certain assumptions about what we assumed was going to happen. So we had a 3% pay award, a cash freeze assumed for National Park grants, and a revised staffing structure following the business review, which we've heard about. That paper also includes the proposals for one-off. This paper also includes the proposals for one-off revenue and capital funding from DEFRA. So very late on in in the process. So in late March, we were advised that DEFRA was likely to give some one-off funding in both revenue and capital nature. That was formalised actually in kind of mid-May. So we've developed a set of proposed schemes, and those are included in Appendix 5 for use of this one-off revenue and capital. At the moment, we are aware it's one-off, and we've had no further knowledge, and with the election coming up, we're not aware of any sort of longitude in terms of that scheme. Each of those schemes was chosen for its alignment with the DEFRA priorities. Claire's going to mention some of those, and also our 6 corporate strategic priorities and 60 actions. So Appendix 4 includes our performance to month 2, and I had a discussion with one of our members yesterday about the kind of the usefulness of that appendix, and I appreciate we have a significant amount of projects that we spend and actively engage with, and they're included within our management accounts, but actually not budgeted for. So I've planned a kind of a set of revisions to our key documents for when I discuss the revised budget review in terms of the Financial Advisory Panel in November, and before I bring the revised budget back to full authority in December. So I think that's probably enough for me on this item. There are 7 recommendations, so it's quite a weighty and lengthy report, so I wouldn't really take any questions that there may be on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm absolutely certain there's going to be some questions about this because there's so much in here. So, members, Mandy.
Thank you. And it was me that called then. We had a chat yesterday, and I actually found it quite difficult putting an outturn and the new year all rolled into one paper. So when you're reading it through, especially appendices, you are jumping from one year to another. So for me, it's always nice to have an outturn that, if you like, signs off and finishes that year, and then head into another year and another paper. That's a personal preference, but for the reader, it makes it more understandable. And I think, as we've already said, it's a bit of a struggle with the reserves. There's been, the good news is there's been some fantastic money gained into the authority for all sorts of projects, which is really positive. And for me, it'd be really nice to see them probably separated into earmarked reserves. So you've also got a sense of how much of it's been spent and how much is remaining. And then if you're moving money around to part-fund a project when it's multi-year, it becomes more clear. So I think it would have been helpful on the earmarked reserves to have had an extra column, perhaps detailing why there'd been a big move, because I was going back and forward in the paper a lot because I like to cross-reference it all. But I think a really positive year, really great set of figures. You can't get away from that. But I think, as with all reports, work to do. I understand there might be a change of system coming along. So I think when that's set up, some separating out, so you haven't got a huge big pot without understanding what's in it. And the reason we need to understand, of course, is we are being asked to agree those movements in reserves, etc., in the paper today. So I made sure I went back and cross-referenced it all, but it is time-consuming. So thank you to the team. Great set of accounts, and I think puts the authority in a really positive position coming out of this year and into the next, which is welcome.
Thank you, Ben, for the report. I'm right in saying now that these budget headings are going to stay static, are they, for a number of years, because you've had a big change of headings?
Yes, so we've adopted the kind of the 8 categories as disclosed in the last meeting, yes. So primarily this report is looking at 23, 24, so it's split into the older ones, but we are moving to that new one.
Yeah, brilliant. So, 2 other questions. One is, when you look at the variance, obviously one stands out, and you touched on it briefly, field services. Is that good news, or was the budget set wrong before, or is it due to change the variance? That's one question, if you could elaborate a bit more. The second thing, touching a bit what Mandy said, is Driver Farm. And it's one of these, is it a project, is it a major capital? Clearly it's a big issue, but I don't sense I've had any view of how that's going financially. Yeah, I know when we discussed it, we saw it as quite a major financial issue. I'm used to seeing a lot of project reporting, not seeing that, I'm not seeing it in here. So how's that gap going to be filled? Because I see that's obviously, and then that's obviously linked to asset sales, isn't it? The 2 together, I see quite a big financial risk, and I'm just not sure that's been covered off.
Thank you. So the first one, in terms of the variance, that on the field service team is really good news. So decision was taken by my predecessor and the teams to instigate internally charged works. So using the field service team to undertake work on our estate with a view to actually whether it could be an externally pushed area. So actually, in terms of the budget, we had three fixed-term contract members of staff and one assistant ranger undertaking these works that we actually recharge the services. So rather than using potentially external companies and other sources, we have used internally generated funds. So it's actually really good use. It's enabled them to be very proactive in the work that's been done. I mean, countered by the reducing resources from the business review, but yes, overall that's really good news. And the second one, in terms of Driver Farm, I mean, there is going to be a paper brought to members in September detailing that. There was a lot of work going on behind the scenes on that. Previous papers we had predicated the income from the sale of East Anstey. That is still progressing with solicitors at the moment. We have fallback position in terms of some of our reserves and other funding streams. So I would say that one is probably pushed to September, and you'll get a full report on the progress for the year, and also October, apologies. But that one will be discussed in full with kind of options and our future plans and programme. But essentially, that's a huge capital programme for us in itself, all the aspects of it.
Yeah. But going forward, how is it going to be reported? Are we going to have sort of quarterly reports? Are we going to have annual reports? I'm used to very much projects where money is monitored very strictly, as well as outputs and inputs. And I just want to clarify in my mind how, because it's not what I'm used to. I'm used to seeing more reporting. That's what I'm used to. I'm new here, so how will that be done going forward? Maybe you're not the right one to answer.
Well, no, I mean, in terms of reporting, it will be on a quarterly basis, because we will bring our quarterly activity to you. Mandy also mentioned that our finance system changing. We're moving away from our current finance system towards the end of the year. We're looking at systems that have got a lot of more kind of project accounting built into them. So actually will enable us to kind of track these projects and schemes through our processes. So it will actually allow us to report on a specific project and give us the full kind of breakdown, really. We haven't got that functionality at the moment, and it's kind of a very outdated system that we're currently using to fulfil that.
Okay, then.
So on the subject of driver, we will be having a workshop in September, and I think some of those things we need to iron out as members what we want to see, because obviously decisions need to be made. The paper will come in October. So the workshop in September will be for us all to have a view on and have an update what's been going on and the decision. We need to talk about all the options and then the decision we make in October. So I hope that clarifies that. Laura, you were next.
Yes. Do you want to use the microphone? Yeah, for people at home who are nothing else to do.
Hello.
Hear what we're saying.
Yeah. Thank you. I just echo the comments of a really good report. Really good to see positive progress. It's clear all the hard work that you're doing as a team. I just wanted to ask about the DEFRA one-off grant, half of its revenue, and just the longer-term plan and beyond that, because there's a couple of staff posts in there, and just what we're thinking, assuming that won't come again, because it probably won't, with that, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, part of the money is going to fund a 2-year fixed-term contract for some additional ecology support, because historically we have been really underfunded in terms of ecology, and there's such a lot that's going on at the moment, so many projects and really positive things going on. I mean, beyond that, unfortunately, we can't plan any further in relation to we just don't know what's going to happen in terms of our core grant for ongoing resource. Obviously, there's also quite a lot of project money that's coming in, so things like the Pioneers Heritage Lottery funding and the Landscape Recovery Scheme, which has a sort of a big ecological element of it. We would look potentially to those bringing in more resource as well. But for now, it's a sort of a short-term fix, really, to provide some more support to the team in delivering the things that we're doing at the moment. And we'll have to look at how we can assimilate resources in the longer term to be able to support that work, or we won't be able to continue doing that work.
the usual
Yeah, I
questions
guess
around
it's
funding.
also an opportunity to show DEFRA why it's needed
Yes.
on an ongoing
Exactly,
basis.
yeah.
Look at what we've done with this post,
Yes.
the risk of going. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? Mark?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure whether, well, yeah, I think it's right, I can raise that, but you touched on very briefly the planning backlog funding and the idea of clearing that backlog for the expenditure occurring this year. Obviously, I'm very conscious I'm sat next to the chair planning. So, I'm sure the backlog's by no way as bad as, say, another authority. But how do we, is that actual, if that money, is that money actually going to be enough? And then if it's not enough, we get back to what Andrew was saying about budgeting in the first place. If it's not enough, how do we stop that sort of catch-22, ever increasing circle going on where the backlog doesn't get cleared, and because it doesn't get cleared, we've got a bigger backlog, and we all know that despite the excellent work that this authority does in so many other areas, planning seems to be the one a lot of people care about if they haven't had their planning permission on time, etc., etc. So one, well, it's probably asking you when it's going to be enough isn't probably the right thing, Ben, but how do we stop that from becoming a problem so in 2 years' time we're not even in worse position?
That one as well. So we have this one-off piece of funding, which is very welcome from government, the Planning Skills Delivery Fund, to in effect clear the backlog that we have currently in relation to both planning applications and enforcement cases. So it's quite a, it's quite a sort of a significant ask in terms of the team. It's in effect paying for an additional member of staff during that period. I think we're also aware that we've had quite a big turnover in the planning team, but it does feel very much more settled now. We have one vacancy at the moment. We're just looking in terms of how we use that resource, and particularly in terms of enforcement. We haven't had a dedicated enforcement officer for a number of years, and officers have undertaken that role. So we're just looking at how, going forward, we might use that resource in a way to support particularly the enforcement activities. So I think the clearing of the backlog is going fairly well so far. I think it would take a little while to to sort of work it, ramp up really, because there are some sort of historic cases in there which are have sat there for a while because they are either quite complex. Some of them, I think it's also worth saying, is that it's not necessarily with us, it's because we've been waiting for things, responses from applicants or further information. And actually, talking with the team and Joe as the new development manager, is that actually for some of those we will look to just determine them, so if rather than just them sitting there as a backlog, we can determine them, and then people can, bring in a further application if they feel that they want to do that. So yes, the aim is to sort of clear that backlog, and then beyond that, we feel we should have the resources to deal with the ongoing caseload, because the caseload itself, is reasonably steady. We're not seeing a huge increase in numbers of applications, so it should be possible. I think the backlog is probably a historic thing in relation to complexity of cases and and turnover of a bit of disruption in the team really.
It's only sort of, thank you, Ben. Huge amount of material in here to digest, actually. I think all it proves to me is sort of, I think best use of resources are being made. Every last thing that we can do is being worked with at the moment to best effect. And I think, obviously, I have to thank the teams for doing that, and that's really, really appreciated. We're obviously in a time of significant political change, and an awful lot of the assumptions been made during this paper could, of course, change significantly in a very short period. So the challenges are there, Ben. Undoubtedly. I'd like to think they might change for the better, because we've been in a period of stagnation for quite a long time in the activity that the National Park can do. So there's opportunity maybe as well there. So on that basis, I'd like to move the recommendations.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Laura? Oh, John. John, let's have John. Laura, let's have All those in favour? Thank you very much. So, back to you for 10.2.
Thank you, members, for the kind words. So moving from the review of the management accounts, we now turn to the financial accounting. So the statement of accounts is compiled on a totally different basis to our management accounts and looks quite different. There are a number of accounting adjustments, such as depreciation, recharging of overheads, pension fund accounting, which all impact upon the financial accounts, but not those presented in the previous item. So these adjustments and a kind of a reconciliation between the two is included on page 9 of the statement of accounts for you to review. So the 23-24 statement of accounts is prepared by myself as the Chief Finance Officer. It presents our financial position and our performance of the authority for the year ended 31st of March 2024. So it's in compliance with the relevant regulations and standards. Our balance sheet on page 13 shows a net asset position of 22.7 million. This is 1.4 million greater than last year, due in part to probably two elements really. There's been a favourable reduction again in the pension fund net liability. There's also been an increase in our property, plant and equipment due to land and buildings revaluations, but also our capital spend on vehicles and equipment assets, which we've kind of partially discussed earlier. So the authority is recommended to note the statement of accounts. It's been certified by the Chief Finance Officer. It's been submitted to our external auditor for audit, and it's also been put up on our website for public review. The auditor will issue an opinion on the financial statements once they've completed their works. They also conclude on whether our authority's arrangements for economy, efficiency and effectiveness are sufficient. So I'd also like to can't get the words this morning, to explain that the account's been prepared on a going concern basis. I've assessed that the authority has a balanced medium-term financial plan. We have a robust budget setting process. We have got many ongoing funding streams. We've got adequate reserves to meet future challenges. And the going concern basis assumes the authority will continue for the foreseeable future. So we'll see what happens on Thursday, but that is our primary basis for operation. The accounts show the authority's priority of achieving core services and improving our performance. So they reflect our legal and equality obligations, our financial and risk management, as well as our governance in the form of the annual governance statement, are all wrapped up in this document. The accounts also show our income, our expenditure, assets and liabilities, and reserves and balances. So I think it's probably enough to say on that one as I have done. So members are asked to consider and note this statement of accounts for 23-24, draft at this stage.
Thank you, Ben. John, did you have your hand up there?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I always find it really difficult to make any useful and meaningful remark about statements of accounts when they appear on agendas, no matter where, because it's all done and dusted, really, isn't it, Ben? And just for the sake of argument, if I were to notice the odd £1 million wrong, it'd be too late. And I'm sure I didn't. Don't worry. So can I move the recommendation, please?
Thanks, John. Mandy.
Thank you. I'm happy to second, but just make a couple of comments if I may. I think probably the one thing for me it would be nice to see was a little bit more in the intro about what the park has done and what it's achieved, because this stands as a record whether it's read. And the second thing I think that was a standout for me actually was the numbers and income trend. And if we have a look at the diagram there, it's really pictorial and clearly shown, and that income visitor spend now is sort of more in line with the visitors to the park, and I think that's a really positive trend, and I hope moving forward we see even more of that, because it's really important that as well as visitors, there is some income achieved from them to help the park achieve its purposes. So I think that trend is a welcome one, and it would be great to see that continuing in future years.
Thank you. Any more questions before we take the vote? Oh, Chris, sorry.
It's not a question exactly, but it is a comment. I'm delighted to see that the use of pinkery has gone up, and we've had more young people than ever coming there. We've had worries about pinkery over the years, and it does need to keep on the upward trend. So I'm sure Ben hasn't got the details at the moment, but please keep us up to speed with whether or not the numbers are going up steadily, and if they're not, obviously we'll have some concerns in the future, because I know for schools it's not that easy anymore to bring parties away, but if it starts to slip, I think it would be a worrying factor for us. Thank you.
Francis?
Yeah, just on the same subject, probably in the wrong place. There was a note of an under-recovery of income of 19,000 of Pinkery. I'm not quite sure what under-recovery means. It suggests to me a bad debt. Do we mean that? Or do we mean we just didn't make as much money as we thought we were going to?
Yes, the latter.
Right, okay, it's not a bad debt.
Yeah. We've actually got back into item 8 in the corporate plan.
I know, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, it's actually fine. So in item 8 there is a target achieved. So that's diversification of Pinkery. So yes, the education environment is extremely challenging currently, but we've had a great use of Pinkery from such schemes as our Young Ranger scheme, and we've also got some grant income coming in for a project called Generation Green 2, which is coming in mainly on streets 2024-25. So I will keep you informed. I'm not aware of the exact details currently, but I know there is a lot of work in terms of our diversification of income streams to that site.
Thank you, Ben. Using your knowledge, because I can read this and not get the same level as you, and it's obviously your first year here, next year will be different because you've been here 12 months, and we can sort of hold you to account a bit more. What would you say, in a nice way, what would you say is we should watch is the good news for the accounts going forward, and what's the bad news in terms of us monitoring it? What would be on your mind?
The good news for me is the staggering amount that we are involved with in terms of achieving our priorities, the areas we're going into, the clarity of direction. That is the good news. The bad news, I just resort to our core funding because aside from the one-off that we've had this year, this will be our 6th year of non-inflated national park grants. So for us, that's probably the biggest issue. It's why we had to undertake our business review last year. So that kind of seeing what trends happen after Thursday and seeing the direction of the government in terms of funding, that will be our biggest challenge going into the new year.
Yeah, I mean hope to account in a nice way.
I was amused by the pun. Okay, any more questions? Mike?
Yes, just picking up on that last point. How does our position compare in the wider picture with other national parks? Are you able to answer that?
Not at this point. I mean, each national park is very different in terms of build structure, the activities they're involved with. I haven't really got the metrics on that to be able to give you a coherent answer at this stage.
Okay, but just at some point it might be interesting as a baseline to compare ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, no other hands. So we've been moved and seconded on this item. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. And moving on to item 11, I'm not putting my microphone on now, is the annual Treasury Management Report. There's a theme going here, I can't see.
Sorry, you've got me again. Do apologise.
You have a different job title in this one, then?
Yeah, slightly different job title. So our next stop off on the review journey for 23-24 is in respect of our Treasury Management activities. So within this context, Treasury Management refers to borrowing and lending decisions that aid the management of our cash balances. So the report covers our Treasury Management performance for the year, for last year, provides some information on the economic background, debt management or lack of debt management, investment activity, and our compliance with the statutory and regulatory guidance for the TM activities for the authority for last year. We have no borrowing plans, we have not borrowed, and we have invested all our surplus funds into a deposit arrangement with Somerset Council. The authority is debt-free, as I've said, did not need to borrow for its capital plan, and we continue to lend all our surplus funds to Somerset Council under a surplus level agreement which ensures priority towards security and liquidity, which are our core aims really in this. So as you'll see, we earned a higher interest income than the previous year, mainly due to the increase in interest rates, obviously. So the average daily balance of our authority's cash was around 3.1 million. So 3.12 million, 2023 it was 3.07 million. Gross interest earned last year was 156,000, and that compares to 56,000 in the previous year. And the average rate earned was around 5%, so it's just 0.03% below the average base rate for the year. So it's really encouraging performance by the team at Somerset Council managing this. We've got a lot of respect for the team there. They really know what they're doing. It's really been a kind of a really positive attribute for us as we kind of enter this business review budget situation. So really all I need to say is that we have followed SIP for Treasury Management Code, SIP for Prudential Code, statutory guidance on local government investments. We also adhere to the Environment Act 95 and Local Government Act 2003 in relation to this. Really, I'm asking as members to note the Treasury Management outturn for 23-24, but I will take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Bill.
I'd like to move that we accept the recommendation.
Thank you. Can I have a second? Lee.
Sorry, Chair, it's a point of order. I do apologise. I did read this form, so I've got a declaration of interest. I noticed there is some funds invested with Lloyds Bank. I work for Lloyds Bank, so I should have declared that at the start. I do apologise.
Well, you now made me think, should we all be looking at this list? There seems to be a bit of a Canadian influence down that list. Have you noticed?
Right.
I was going to second it.
Thank you, Mike. Any more questions? No. Happy to move to the vote? Yep. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Bit of a change now. Going to BNG. Over to Claire.
Hello, it's the Let Ben and Claire show today, isn't it? Yeah, so this item, members, is around biodiversity net gain. So you will recall that there's a new statutory requirement that's come into the planning world where we're looking to deliver an enhancement to nature through development rather than just in the past. You know, it's been a sort of trying to avoid or mitigate impacts on wildlife. So the new national requirement, mandatory requirement, is for developments now to achieve 10% biodiversity net gain. You will recall last July we brought a paper to members which was sort of trialling this coming into effect, and we had a sort of a short voluntary trial just to test out how some of that might work in practice, and also members approved an Exmoor specific technical guidance note just to provide further information for applicants in terms of how that would all work. The reason for bringing the paper to you today is that the requirements are now in place, so they came into force for major sites in February and for smaller sites in April. And you know, there are some exceptions to that, so it doesn't apply to exemptions. It doesn't apply to all applications that we receive, but it is now fully in force. There's also been some additional sort of information in relation to how the biodiversity net gain can be delivered. So it can either be done on site or it can be done off site. And the report is to sort of just provide a bit more information on that, and we have updated the technical advice note in the light of that. One of the ways that it can be delivered off-site, it can be either through land that the applicant owns or controls or has organised themselves, or it can be that they can purchase or have an arrangement with another landowner who is providing what's called a habitat bank. And as the local planning authority, we may have a role in approving those habitat banks. And so the purpose of the paper, because this is a new sort of responsibility that we have, is to agree the process by which we do that, and we are proposing that it's delegated to the Chief Executive. And that is then secured through the signing of a Section 106 agreement. That's how that will happen. The other recommendation is basically just to note that in relation to the technical guidance note, we do have the ability to charge fees for doing this. in effect to sort of recoup our costs in considering the applications for the habitat banks, and in particular we also are responsible for ensuring that the monitoring of the delivery of these habitat banks happens. The requirement for biodiversity net gain is that it's delivered for at least 30 years. So there is a sort of a considerable ongoing cost to doing that. The fees were included in the original technical guidance note, but the only change that we've made is that we've kind of identified that the work involved in actually considering the registration of a habitat bank is not insignificant. So we're splitting out the fees so that there's an upfront sort of application fee for registering a habitat bank, and then the work that we have to do for that is covered irrespective of whether the habitat bank goes forward or not. If it does, and we end up signing a Section 106 agreement, then the balance of the fee would then become due, and that would cover the costs for monitoring. So there's just a slight change really to how that's worked. So I hope that sort of just gives you a context for the report and the recommendations. I have Ruth and Annie sitting at the back there, so if there are any questions, I know it's quite a technical subject, but we'll do our best between us to answer any questions or comments that you have. Thank you.
Okay, Susan, I think you were first.
No, thank you, Claire, and also to Ruth and Aaron for this really good report. Yeah, I'm very supportive of the National Authority charging fees in relation to habitat banks in terms of putting them in place and monitoring, because obviously this whole approach has a very clear hierarchy, but you read things and you see things that people thinking, oh, well, the habitat bank's like the easy option and we can just sort of just do what we want on site. So it's really important that is very well monitored, and definitely we should be charging for that delivery. This is a slight aside, so apologies, and it might be something that's come up before or something that's in our mind's eye about, as we get more familiar with this process and it beds in, have we had thoughts about potentially being a habitat bank ourselves? I'm sure you have, and it's a bit of a potentially double-edged sword, but I just thought I'd ask.
Yes, please.
Yes, we have, and we've looked into it quite carefully. There are a few reasons why we're not progressing at the moment. One is that we're not sure that we have the land that's suitable because of, a lot of our land is already currently protected as triglycerides, for example. The other is that there's a sort of a legal, we would have to create a new legal body to be the habitat bank provider. It's called a responsible body, and there's a process to go through for that. Some local authorities we know are going down that route, so it's not to say that we won't in future, but we just haven't got to that sort of stage now. But yes, it is certainly a potential for us, and we have been sort of keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's plenty to be getting on with. I agree. Yeah.
Mandy, you were next.
Thank you. Absolutely welcome it, but I suppose the slightly troublesome bit for me for 30 years, in that a property could change hands numerous times over 30 years. Is something going to be attached to the deeds? It says that's, part of that house and home moving forward. And the second thing is it says they've got to be sort of monitored for 30 years. So if you think of 30 years worth of banks and the monitoring of those and how many there could be in 30 years, then that could be a substantial amount of monitoring and could take more and more time as each year goes by. So I'd just be interested to see how that would be managed. Thank you.
I'll make a start and then probably those will come in. So yes, so 30 years is a mandatory requirement. It's not something that we've put in place. So that is what is expected. And actually, in terms of delivering the wildlife enhancement, we would hope that it would go beyond that as well. It's something that would be nice, if it was in perpetuity. But 30 years is I guess, a minimum. For the habitat banks, the way that they would be secured is through a legal agreement, so a Section 106. And so that would be a sort of a document that, so Section 106, we use it, are you familiar with this? We use it in planning for things like deliverable affordable housing, for example. So it's a legal document. and as part of that, then it's the landowner's responsibility to ensure that that habitat bank is creating the habitat that they say it's going to deliver. Our role as the planning authority is simply to monitor that is happening, and the monitoring sort of schedule that we set out in the guidance notice is that we would do it at certain intervals. So it might be, I can't remember exactly offhand, but the first and the second year, and then year 5, year 10, year 15, etc. And then I guess the intention is that if it's not happening, we have an enforcement role in terms of actually making that happen. In relation to the other ways that it could be delivered, which is on-site or by another piece of land that the applicant controls, again, that would be controlled either through a condition or through a Section 106 agreement. So those are the mechanisms from which it is intended that it's ensured that it's delivered. Is there anything further to add to that? No.
It's just to say that the legal agreement goes with the landlord. So if a landowner was to sell the land, it would still apply. That's all.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Mandy?
Thank you. My last question was if it's off-site and away.
Oh, outside the area, outside the national park.
It could be anywhere, presumably in the country. Will that then go to another authority elsewhere for them to monitor? Because we're not going to be travelling to Scotland to monitor.
Yes, and so it's a good question, Randy. These are the things we've been trying to get our heads around. So yes, if it's a habitat bank outside of the national park, then it would be the relevant local authority in that area who would be responsible for it. So yes, and it all gets, I should mention, it all gets registered on a national register that Natural England holds. So there is, I guess, a national kind of mechanism for logging all of these habitat banks.
Thank you very much. So I've got Francis, then Dr. Kelly, then Laura.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. More on the same subject. I am really worried about these habitat banks and about a trade in biodiversity net gain units. And very much along Susan's lines, it allows people to behave really badly somewhere. Because it's all right, because someone else is, and that's not what our purpose as a national park is about. The point of us being here is not to let people, and in the worst case scenario, let people behave badly here, do damage to the environment here, and then in the north of Scotland, I bought some units in the north of Scotland, that's all right then, isn't it? It's wrong. I know we have to work within the rules that we are given, but I'm really, really unhappy about this. And if anything we could do to discourage, I think we should. And I would be very worried about us as an authority whose job it is to conserve and enhance, to be setting up to trade biodiversity net gain units so that people can behave badly.
Can I respond to that? Yeah, just so I think that is, I think that's very valid concern, and that has been recognised in the way that they have designed how this will work in practice. So the intention is very much that the net gain that's delivered is delivered on site or as close to that site as possible. And the way that the metric, which is how it's calculated, is set up is to incentivise that. So very simply, the further away that you have to deliver your gain, the more expensive or the more that you have to deliver. And also there is an expectation is that the off-site is delivered within the local planning authority area, or it's called the national character area. So for Exmoor, it's sort of Greater Exmoor in effect. So the intention is very much designed to ensure that you're delivering your gain very closely within where the the impact has been effective. The only way that you could possibly, for example, do an impact on Exmoor, and get credits from Scotland is that there's something as a last resort, if it's just not possible for a developer to do that biodiversity net gain either off-site or very closely to it, you can buy national statutory credits, and those have been priced really high to disincentivise people doing that. So that's the way it's intended to operate. I think the way that's going to operate in practice, we will have to see, because there's a lot involved in offering and delivering those habitat banks. So not many have been set up yet. But in time, hopefully, it will develop.
May I come back very briefly? Thank you very much. That is very helpful, and the more difficult you can make it, the better. There is one added bit, is that should we or anybody else be setting up a habitat bank here, then we are removed. Sorry, I'm not speaking to the microphone. Exmoor is very small. It has very limited areas of land. The conservation of the landscape is very much about farming. Anything which uses up land to make habitat banks is deleterious to the park in the sense of its own landscape and in the sense of our purpose to our communities.
I think I just need to mention that obviously it's very in line with our purposes to conserve and enhance wildlife and natural beauty. So I think we would, and certainly the role that we could play as planning authority in checking those habitat banks is to ensure that they do that, so that they should actually be a positive in relation to our purposes. And they can be land that still needs to be managed. That there is. It isn't necessarily kind of changing that sort of land management role, but they can be a positive thing here as well.
Thank you. Mike, you are next. Mike Kelly.
Thank you. I share Francis's concerns about this. It seems to me it's a similar scenario to the nonsense of trying to buy off-site carbon credits, and we're not learning from that exercise and the non-implementation or non-success of that scheme. But the first point is, have we an understanding of the scale of the issue? If we take the profile of the applications that we receive, how many applications, or what proportion of applications, do you think we should be looking to deliver BNG in accordance with this procedure?
Probably quite a small proportion, to be fair. A lot of the exemptions that I mentioned are the sorts of applications that we generally have. So householders, for example, sort of single dwellings, so self-build and custom. There's a bit of a debate over that in terms of definitions, but self-build and custom-build housing wouldn't be required to either. So there's quite a lot that we deal with that wouldn't be covered. I mean, I think I should say at the start, this is actually a positive thing. This is about trying to deliver a better environment for us. The way in which it's delivered is always a matter of detail, isn't it? And this is what we're debating in terms of actually how it works in practice. But we should be quite positive about this coming in. I think so far, anyway, I believe we've only had probably a couple of applications where BNG is required. I think partly people are just sort of holding off really to wait and see how things work in practice. So I guess we might get more coming through, but in terms of the ones we've had so far, it's only actually been a couple.
If I may just come back on that, I do know from my own professional experience it does add an additional layer of complexity to the system. There's no doubt about that, but we all agree that the objective is sound, no question at all about that. But given the stretched staff resources we haven't got an enforcement officer, for example. If we have to deliver off-site through Section 106 agreements, those are a matter of concern in respect to delays introduced into the system as well. So there are knock-on implications that we have to understand. But if it's only affecting a small minority of applications, and we've got the resources, then that's fine. But I suspect that there will be some negative consequences for trying to operationalise this particular procedure. which other authorities have to face, I suppose. So, but in terms of the objective, I suppose we would all support it. We should do, of course, but it's actually making sure we have the capacity to try and make it work in practice without introducing undue delays into our performance targets.
Just quickly on that, if I might, Chair. So all local authorities have been given some additional burdens funding to start with in terms of setting this up. So that's been, helpful in terms of, funding the resource that we've had to put into understanding what's required. I think you're absolutely right. It is quite complex. It's taken quite a lot of time for people to get their heads around it. I'm sure that will improve both for, kind of the applicants and the authority in terms of implementing it. But yes, it is a resource implication. But we have had some extra funding to help that. We don't know that will continue going forward, unfortunately, but we know that there is some sort of initial support in us getting ready for it.
Thank you. Laura? Thank you, Chair. 2 questions from me. One, good to see the fees in there. So I just wanted to check how they've been established, if it's been benchmarked, if we know it's going to cover our costs, whether there might be a risk there. And then a slightly left field one, nice seeing all the photos in very word-heavy reports. And it just got me thinking, bug hotels, birdhouses, our rangers make those, the kids we engage with make those. Is there a possibility that we could sell those as part of this, as another revenue stream, or is it a conflict of interest, or is it just not practical?
I don't know on that last one. We'll go away and think about it, but thank you for suggesting it. Yes, and the first one, in terms of the way the fees have been identified, we've been working very closely with the Devon authorities, and Devon County have employed a biodiversity net gain officer who we all sort of contribute towards, and who actually has been really, really helpful in helping us, get ready for this. And so, to start with, we have used the fees that have been developed. There is basically a formula based on the number of days we expect would be required of an ecology officer to do the monitoring and the initial assessment for the habitat banks. We are going to monitor that going forward and to see how that actually works in practice, and so we can adjust that if we need to, and it's probably something we're thinking that we would bring to members in the sort of annual fees, paper that comes of all of our fees, so that we can adjust it if needed. But that's how it's done currently, is based on, in effect, the hourly rate of an ecologist to deliver what's required.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Thank you, Chairman. My concern relates to the exemption for retrospective applications, and what is being done to ensure that we don't have a host of retrospective applications, although I can see on some sides retrospective applications might be welcomed as a reduction in the work that we have to do. So that there's a sort of sword of Damocles here. What is happening about retrospective applications? Is a penalty being applied to it, and where are we going?
Very good point. I think we all share your concerns there. It's something that's been decided nationally, and I think the whole planning and sort of natural environment community are very concerned about that. It does in effect give people a free pass, as it were, in terms of not having to deliver BNG. So I think all we can do is sort of add our voice to the national concerns over it, and try and ensure, it's been said before, in terms of our enforcement, we have some resource to look at that. But it is a problem once it's happened. There's very little that we can do about it, and no penalties that we can currently apply.
Thank you. Susan, you're next.
Come back and just really coming back on Francis' point around landscape and farming, and it's just an example. I relatively recently visited a farm not a million miles off Exmoor, which has a small herd of they farm with a small herd of cattle, and interestingly they have a lot of really nice, well, if you're into that kind of thing, really nice culm grassland, which is really kind of boggy, marshy kind of wetland grassland, which is really good for many reasons. But interestingly, they have put themselves forward as, and I think they are going to be verified as a Habitat Bank. So it was just a bit of an alternative framing, saying actually it's potentially an actual opportunity for farmers to actually diversify and increase biodiversity on their land through becoming Habitat Bank and creating a really good income stream, an ongoing income stream. And also quite reassuring that, you know, the young couple that I met, you know, they have a very sound ethos and wanting to do more in terms of biodiversity. So I think there's a good way of looking at it as well, which is perhaps reassuring as well, that it can be seen as a positive thing, and also, you know, for farmers it is another opportunity and in terms of diversification and strengthening their biodiversity on their land.
Thank you. That was helpful. Frank, you were next.
Thank you. Can you clarify how the biodiversity net gain, whether off-site or on-site, will be presented to the planning committee? How that will be, and do we need to take that into any kind of consideration? Because the final decision, if my understanding is right, is going to be made by the CEO. So is there any kind of discussion between the planning chair or the planning committee, etc.? And also, can you see any viability issues if linked to a small development that includes affordable housing provision? Because I know we don't get large developments on Exmoor very, very often, but you know, viability is often put there as why we shouldn't have so many affordable houses and the cost. So I just wondered if there would be a small, I know these aren't huge numbers on the comparison to building large, you know, houses, to building several houses. I just wondered if that would be likely to be put forward as an issue.
Yeah, so in relation to how it's presented to the committee, so it is a statutory requirement that a planning application that falls under the requirements of biodiversity net gain delivers the 10%, and there's a sort of metric and formula that is used to calculate that. So that would be included in the report that went to either planning committee or a delegated report. And the way it's secured, again, this has been sort of set up nationally, is through a condition. So there's a standard condition that all relevant applications will have now. So I think in terms of the planning committee's consideration, it will be for them to, you know, I guess, be reassured that what is required in terms of this statutory 10% gain is going to be delivered and can be secured through a Section 106 agreement or whatever the mechanism is going to be. So, yeah, you know, it will be part of the application in effect and the report that comes to members. In relation to the approval of the Habitat Bank, which is a slightly separate issue because this is a, you know, different responsibility. Yes, the proposal is that that's delegated to the chief executive, because I guess the rationale behind that is that it's a sort of it's a technical assessment in terms of, you know, is this Habitat Bank something that ecologically is going to deliver what they say it's going to deliver. So it's not really a kind of a, you know, do we want it or don't we want it? It's more of a technical process. So at the moment, the proposal is that is just delegated to the chief executive or, you know, to officers.
Can I just come back?
Very briefly, please.
Yeah, just for clarification on that. If we were to get a lot of applications coming to us, and every time they say, oh, it's going to a bank, it's going to a bank, I mean, can we comment on that as a planning committee, or we just have to accept that because that is what you can do?
I think that you just have to accept that. It's not really up to us how the applicant delivers the net gain, as long as they deliver the 10% net gain. So anything to add to that, Ali?
Just to add, I think as part of the consideration process, we need to make sure that they've applied the hierarchy correctly. Yeah. So we need to be confident that they can't deliver on-site and haven't or can't otherwise deliver off-site before they go down the statutory credits route.
Andy, you were next.
Great, thank you very much. Two questions really. One, very good neat examples in the back of Bug Hotel, and it strikes me we should be marketing those almost, or advertising those as seen as a positive thing. So I think those are great examples. And people should be encouraged to do it regardless. But then it struck me, if a landowner does then they go for planning. When's the baseline drawn, or do they set themselves a higher hurdle by improving biodiversity now? Go on, answer that one now, I'll come back to the second one. Yeah, and the second one, as Mike asked a question about the percentage, and I understood from the training of small potential being impacted by this. And I think this should be positive. However, I've had some feedback from 2 people who've used version 2 of this, and it was a bit negative, so I think maybe we need to get feedback from applicants on how we can improve it. But the thing that struck them, they went in and used the small site metrics, and very quickly they found they were near priority habitat. I think you've got to be 500 metres. Then you go to the large site. And their observation was, most of Exmoor, you're going to be within 500 metres of priority habitat. And therefore, you're going to end up going to the large site. So this was a small shed for a small holding. So suddenly it became quite a bureaucratic exercise. So suddenly it went from, I said, oh, don't worry, not many people are going to... And I think I'm not going to say what they've done now, but it became a negative exercise for them and bureaucratic, where somehow we need to make sure it's kept positive, don't we? So everyone wants to do it and wants to improve. And that's the tricky one, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, on that, it's a statutory national metric, and the way that is applied, whether it's a national, a large site or a small site, is not our process. That is the process that has been set up by government. So it wouldn't be something that we can change to do differently. I mean, I think again, we do encourage people to come and engage with officers early to help if people need help to think about the process and what is required. In terms of do you enhance before, again, the way that the metric works is that you have a baseline of what the current habitat value is, and then you have to, and that gives you a figure, and then you have to deliver something by the end of it, which is 10% more than that. If people decide, actually, well, we'll make it, it's quite a nice habitat already, we'll go and do a bit of clearance so it's not very nice habitat, and then we don't have to provide some. If people can try and get around it that way, the opposite to what you're saying in a way, is that there is a way of dealing with that, in that we can go back to a baseline of 2020 using aerial photography, so that's supposed to be a disincentive to people clearing land or doing something in advance of development. If they kind of already enhanced it, then yes, it would be, you use that as your baseline, and then you're doing 10% on top of it. So yeah, it would be more again. But again, that's all positive, isn't it, from a nature and environmental point of view.
So
I mean, the bureaucracy, I do accept it. And I guess we just have to try, and the more that we work through this and people work through it, the more familiar we'll get. Hopefully, the easier it will become for people. And the small sites approach is intended to be simpler. It can be done by anybody, etc. But I do accept it's another thing that people are going to have to get familiar with and do.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Mandy, you were next.
Thank you for a second bite of the chair. I'll be very quick. I've just been thinking this through. We are looking ahead in years to come. And I just wonder if you were a large corporate builder and you bought a swathe of land on Exmoor and decided that the whole area was then going to be a habitat bank, and you put in lots of hedgerows and things, and then that took that out of perhaps farming use. And I'm thinking the parallel with the sort of solar farms and the big debate over how that land is used differently. If someone came along to do that, would they actually have to ask for planning because it's an actual change of use? And I know it's a way down the line, but if you are a large corporate, that would be probably a potential thing to have and to do. So I just wonder whether there's anything we can do to potentially protect, whether in our plan, that type of thing, so that it doesn't happen to any extent across Exmoor. So I'm following it through to the nth degree, but it could happen.
Again, I suppose I go back to the fact that this should be positive, and that actually, that is if we're creating more habitat and enhancing the environment as a result, then we wouldn't necessarily be against that. I think the example that you're expressing there in terms of a large corporate organisation buying up land on Exmoor to do this, it's possible. I think it's probably unlikely, because we already, as has been alluded to, we already have a lot of high quality habitat, and therefore if a corporate was going to do that, I think they would be going and buying up land which is, you know, quite degraded and really not a lot of interest, and then they get a greater increase in their you know, the work that they're doing to enhance it, so they can sell more credits, they get more money for it in effect. So I suspect that, you know, the likelihood is not as high. Plus also because of this fact, if you've got to deliver your net gain, there is a hierarchy that Ali referred to, which is it's either got to be on site. If it can't be on site, it's got to be close to site. If it can't be close to site, it's got to be within the local authority area or the national character area, natural character area. And we don't have a lot of development on Exmoor. Maybe some around the outskirts, you know, which is relevant. I don't think there's going to be a huge demand. So, you know, I don't know, but you know that would be my kind of, you know, estimate there. So I think it's probably something that, you know, if it happened, we would deal with it, but it's probably not that likely to happen, not in a great scale anyway, at great scale.
Right, Bobbin, you were next.
Yeah, thank you. A few points here. I think first of all, reminder to members.
Oh, sorry.
A reminder to members that we don't really have a choice in this. This is statutory. This is what we have to do against our local plan and our plan, full stop. And when you read through the notes there, you know, that hierarchy, I think we've got to remind people there is a distinct hierarchy. And we don't have a great deal of major applications. So the chances of needing to offset a big biodiversity net gain or a big habitat bank one are quite limited on Exmoor, I would hope. Anyway, just in answer to just to comment on a couple of bits that have been made. The definition of farmland and farming use has been redefined by HMRC relatively recently to encompass all the new land management schemes. So, you know, actually a habitat bank is regarded as farming by HMRC now. So it is not different from farming with animals or for production. You do not need to produce food on land anymore. I know that galls with me a little bit as a farmer, obviously, but you do not need to produce food. All you have to do is manage land to be eligible under HMRC for that to be farmland. So it's just a reminder for that. It's not an easy one. Just a reminder as well that actually most of this, I think, as a national park, we've been doing already. It's in our local plan. In an awful lot of applications that we do, we put Section 106 agreements again, or we condition those applications for quite a lot of what's happening here already. So it's effectively added to it. Yes, there is going to be an additional cost and additional workload, and I think that's a principal concern for me. As time goes on, of course, we're going to have more and more and more of these that we're technically supposed to be overseeing, checking, enforcing, maybe. And I think therein lies a concern, and how that is funded in the long term is going to be something very different. The habitat bank bit, if people want to buy somewhere for a habitat bank, there is absolutely nothing at all we can do to stop them anymore. And unfortunately, I can give you a dozen places now in the southwest that have been invested in precisely for that reason. Even one that a county council itself bought for a habitat bank to ensure it could facilitate its own development. So there's some concerns as we go forward, and I think we've got to be realistic about some of this as well. So I'd just like to move the recommendation as it stands and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Dominic, you're next.
Yeah, sorry. I know we're pressed for time. It's a shame this had to come in front of the AGM. But anyway, on the retrospective application thing, an economist would say, well, that's an incentive. It's not just unfortunate if someone does it. It is an incentive to do a retrospective application. And therefore, what you would do to basically reverse that incentive is, for instance, to apply a higher fee to a retrospective application, if we're allowed to. That would be a reason. That would be a case for doing it. So basically, you then neutralise the incentive. And unless there's a legal reason why we can't do that, I would suggest we consider that. The other issue is actually to talk about what we haven't spoken about, which is most applications, of course, the Appendix 1 applies, the enhancement for what? That for most people that we're dealing with, that's actually the one they're going to be looking at. The BNG and the habitat such isn't so relevant to them. So the issue on that is the trigger list when I first saw it, when I had to fill one in, was not very well designed. So hopefully that's been improved. I think Andrew alluded to this as well. It was quite difficult to get through and then didn't seem relevant to the application. And so I think a way of trying to, which I think actually this document does a good job of doing, of trying to turn this into a positive. Of saying, look, how isn't it great? We've got these great ideas that you can enhance and therefore meet the policy that we've got here, because we're now making it that you have to do one of these enhancements. So we've beefed up that policy really in a way. And these are the ways you can do it. Now there's the issue of additionality. You know, if I do a 300 square metre shed on a farm, then that means here I can do 100 metres of hedgerow. Now, most farms will already have many more metres than that of hedgerow, so presumably this is 100 new metres of hedgerow. And that could probably be covered under the CS agreement anyway, or FIPL could probably cover some of that. You know, and I think that's something we need to knit these things together a bit and sort of say, look, in order to do some of these, there are other opportunities within your existing funding mechanisms if you're a farmer or a landowner to do it. And if you're a homeowner, of course, then Laura's great idea. Absolutely, pop over to Exford and buy one of our selection of bird boxes and bat boxes or whatever it might be. That would be, or Simmons bathroom. That'd be a really great idea. So I think turning it into positively good, but it is that issue of course, what if it's a condition? What's the enforcement? How are you ever going to know? Did anyone do it? Is anyone going to come out and look? No. That doesn't matter in a way. That's why I think we're in a better place if we make this a positive that people want to do, rather than try and pretend this is a condition that anybody actually will ever be found in breach of. Thanks.
That's a very positive point, thank you. Evelyn.
Well, Dominic's just covered a couple of things I was going to say, which is wonderful, but I think that we should be hopefully looking at it in a more positive way, and particularly with the reporting, because some of the applications will go through on delegated power, some will come to the authority, to the planning committee, and we need to find a way of, if this is working, celebrating and recording, and presumably it will be reported against our annual performance, so we might see the statistics in one place, but as authority members we maybe ought to be tracking it as well, particularly in its infancy. That's all.
I think it's a positive thing. Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't got much to add to the really good discussion we've had. A most interesting subject. I don't think it's going to affect us too much on the national park, actually. It's outside, perhaps, will be more affected. My one question is what happens if we have a planning application which needs so many credits, but the credit bank doesn't have enough? That might be something we would be involved in. However, I think it's interesting, I think if you were thinking of joining, creating a credit, an ecology credit bank, you want to start from a very low baseline. So a one-out arable field is what you want to start with. If you start with anything better, you're just not going to make that. So it's quite an interesting conversation going on from the other side. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chairman.
Jeremy, did you want to second it?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. Stephen.
Well, I wanted to second it.
Okay.
However, not for the first time Jeremy's beaten me to it. So all I really wanted to say was that, as Robin has said, this is statutory, it's national, and we are seeing a further step this morning in applying the policy here. I would say, however, that we are in a much better position than I think many other authorities are, because of the work that has been done up to now by the team, and I would particularly like to thank them, and particularly Ali, for everything that has been done, because it really has been magnificent. We've talked it through with developers, agents, over the months, and we're in a really good place here on Exmoor because of the background work that's been done. So I would very much like to thank the officers for that. That's great. Happy to second or third. The issue, though, that other members have begun to touch on, I think, is a slightly different thing, and that's about the displacement of carbon responsibilities from elsewhere in the country to areas like Exmoor, and either the buying up of Exmoor farms or indeed the development of farms that people already own, that is a slightly different thing. In fact, a very considerably different thing, and that is going to be something I think that we'll be debating in other ways in the coming months and years. As Robin said, I don't think there's anything we can do about it in planning terms, because it's land use. I don't think there's a planning reason to stop it. I have been tackled by parish councils already to say this is happening. What can we do about it in planning? I think the answer is nothing, unless somebody can tell me different. I'm not aware of that, but it is nevertheless a particular wave we're going to have to surf over the next few years, I think.
Right, there's no more hands, so can we go to the vote, please, members? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, item 13 is to note, so unless anybody's got any questions about it, I propose we note it. Are we all noting? Oh, we're all agreed on that one, thank you. So, oh gosh, we need to note something. Okay, right. Robin's voting. Stephen likes seconding. Because he was thwarted. They've been voted. And we're all in favour, already voted. Thank you. Now, the annual appointments, I do not intend to do what we've done in previous years because I find it extremely dispiriting. So, having gone down the list, we need somebody to volunteer themselves to go on the campaign for National Park. Laura just volunteered. Does anybody else want to do it? She's cast her eye around looking at them severely. Excellent. And then Team Devon. Claire, can you explain what's happening with Team Devon? Because you contacted somebody, didn't you?
Well, yes, we've been contacted by Team Devon, and my understanding is that the expectation is that the chairman of the authority would be the sort of nominated representative on this, with the deputy chairman as the substitute. So if members are content with that, then that's what we would propose to happen.
Are we all happy with that?
Sure.
Brilliant. Now, has anybody got anything that they want to change on that long list? I'm not going to go through it. No? You're all quiet. So are we happy with that? Excellent. Jeremy, would you like to propose? Thank you. Sorry, just being observed. Can I have a seconder so we can volunteer? Evelyn's volunteered. Yeah? All those in favour? Brilliant. See, we managed to do it without getting too wound up about it. Oh, it was awful, the part.
Can I raise a question?
Oh, yeah, of course you can.
Only because last year when we discussed this, appointments, we did sort of say, of course, there are certain things going on, like Campaign for National Parks, which I've been doing, and Laura will now do a better job on, and various others, and AOMB and things like that, where, of course, these things happen, but there's no reporting back to members. So we said we should try and do that. Now, not at the AGM, clearly, but presumably, therefore, there is a plan for us to do it at some point during the year, but with due notice to the people that might need to do some reporting on that. Otherwise, as before, and it's happened, all my experience has been in the last 4 years, is these things just happen and go, and nobody ever knows what's going on. So, and therefore, we don't have any sort of collected institutional memory.
That's really useful. So we used to, when I first started, have a little bit every single meeting, where anybody that had been to anything could report back. Is that right, Stephen? We're the oldest, aren't we?
No more than half a page.
No, I only used to do, because I used to be PMP, so I used to do a little bit. It's just if I mean, sometimes you won't have been, for example. Now, I'm quite happy to reinstate, because then it stops it being one big thing once a year. That, frankly, last time I was sat at where did John come from? North Devon Council. They do it. Sorry, I'm going completely blank. Sorry. It was exceptionally dull. You know, it went on for like a couple of hours with everybody saying, well, I did this and I did that, and I think the rest of us doing our emails or something. Well, clearly I wasn't. I was paying full attention to everything that's being said, but it did get a bit dull. So I think if we did it every time people report back.
And then choose who does it, LC or Rex or whatever.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah. So, but you won't always have a meeting, but if you have one, just a few sentences, what's been going on, highlights.
I mean, is this a members' forum thing?
We used to have it in the meetings.
It won't be
I remember doing it. Sorry?
It won't be in corporate memory if it's at members' forum.
No, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So just half a page of A4 max would be great. Everybody happy with that? Sure. Gosh, we've made a decision in seconds. Right, let's keep going. Item 15, appointment of independent persons under the Localism Act 2011. And we've already welcomed you, but I understand you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself. So you'll have to come forward, I'm afraid, to the microphone. But welcome.
It should be on, I think. I think it's on now. Yeah. Okay. Super. Okay. I'm Diana Mortimer. I'm sort of new to the southwest, having only moved here 2 years ago from Lincolnshire, slightly lumpy part of Lincolnshire. You know, my reason for moving here, why wouldn't you if you could? So that's it. So I've always been very passionate about nature conservation, and that led me to actually studying agriculture, because to understand the environment, you need to understand agriculture, in my humble opinion. So I did that for a number of years, ended up at the National Audit Office, looking at math, value for money, which was fun, as you can imagine. Eventually went back to nature conservation and did a very broad range of things. So, for example, don't know why I'm nervous. There you go. Whole bunch of new people, I guess that's that's why. Things from working with coastal communities, writing management plans for them, working on climate change, seabird monitoring, sort of lots and lots of different things. Livestock farming, as I say, a very broad range. But eventually I found myself being drawn more and more into understanding why is the environment important for people, and how does it deliver our well-being, basically. And that I was very fortunate in that led me into an international space. So I spent probably 15 years representing the UK at UN meetings, hence why I'm nervous in front of you guys. I'm very used to saying thank you, the UK would like to say. But I suppose I'm talking for myself for once, so that's perhaps why it's a bit different. I worked with amazing people from around the world, looking at basically how can we make the environment more important to governments, and what can they do about it, and how can they actually get some money into it. And very, very slowly over time that is coming, and I think what we're seeing, what we've talked about today, is very much about this progress towards incorporating the environment into everybody's lives, which, as I say, for me, is personally very important. My last secondment was actually to the Treasury to work on the economics of biodiversity, so I have also that sort of side to me as well. So I'm here, I'm an independent person, hopefully I have some fresh eyes, fresh ears, and I'm very excited to be working with everyone. So that's it. Any questions?
So Adam, do you want to come and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, good morning. Adam Stanya, vintage year 1966. I was always bad with numbers, which is bad because I'm an accountant. So, I was born in the New Forest, ran away to London to study accounting and finance, and joined KPMG, where I became a chartered accountant. The job is actually really interesting for a short number of weeks. Having qualified, I needed to collect some more time, and one of my partners said to me, why don't you move abroad, which was the idea to go to a strange place with a funny language and become the expert if you could order breakfast after 2 years. Poland or Czechoslovakia was what he suggested. I ended up in Berlin in '93, and have been working in Berlin, Leipzig and Poland for the last sort of 25 years. Different roles, retail, construction, building development. In the last years I've been working for city utilities. Slightly different format in Germany, where the provision of energy is deregulated and regional. So I was running Leipzig. I was the chief financial officer for the Leipzig region. It's a city about the same sort of size as Bristol, where we were supplying gas, electricity and district heating to that area. And then I moved to Poland, where I was the CEO for the Gdansk region. This is district heating, again supplying the same sort of number of people as in Bristol, with ecological solutions for heating. It's a very socialist approach, but it was a very green approach. Our stakeholders, obviously the regulators, the trades unions, the people that are living in the community, so actually consumers as well. There's always a very interesting symbiotic relationship to the people we're working with. Focus is always on how you get people, staff, team, members, and the corporate results on the same page. And very often I was joining places at a time when change was required, either legally or because the markets were changing. So this whole new cultural approach for an old industry or an old business or an old team has always been what I've been doing. However, rat race, forever and ever, didn't really seem appropriate. So we went travelling for a couple of years and decided what to do, and running away to a small remote place and having responsibility for what we're consuming and for what we're doing and what we're putting back into the world was how we ended up in Exmoor. I live in Yard Down. We've been there since some 7 years, and the idea was that tickety-boo, get everything through, quickly change, Life doesn't happen that way. We've actually had family commitments, which we've had time to be able to deal with. But I've also learnt what it means to be responsible for a landowner, as a landowner. I think I've done more accounting and bureaucratic steps with my cows, my pigs and my geese than I ever did as a bookkeeper. 7 years on, I'm now looking to combine those old history experiences I had for the local community, which is why I found the role of independent person very intriguing, probably quite English, and I look very much forward to combining our skills, because I think we have an amazing collaboration potential here, and I look forward to working with you in the coming years.
Thank you. Well, welcome. Lovely to have you here. I'm going to move on to item 16. Oh, sorry. Yes, we've got that. Right. Can I propose John, Chairman of the Standards Committee?
Yeah, that's right. Can I move?
Yes, please. Stephen? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Right, item 16, personal update. We welcome Kay and Nancy, and we say goodbye to Julian. And I've got my microphone on again. And then we're going to any other business of urgency, but I'm going to have a quick adjournment for everybody to use the loo and all those other things that one might need. Hang on, I said yes. How many cups of coffee did you have? So, we really do need to be back here at... Well, we don't.
Could we...
We
just had some news.
Can we just stop the meeting then?
Yeah.
Okay, I officially now stop the meeting. Thank you. Excellent. Mr. Geener's gone, so I now need, because I'm resuming the meeting, somebody to propose, Mr. Trinos, that we're going into confidential...
Can I say propose, please, Chair?
Thank you so much. Seconder, please. Evening, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. So just give